And then there were two. Glad to have you here this morning. Representative Eccles, Representative Dunnington, glad to have you here. All right, we're down to one. Election, that is. We got the primaries behind us, the runoffs behind us. Any lessons from those two elections that we'll use going forward into November?
Yeah, there were a lot of lessons from the recent runoffs that just took place last week. I think the biggest lesson that we learned is that the electorate is really frustrated with incumbents right now. They feel like for the past 10 years that they, as the electorate, have been asking to see change in the state of Oklahoma, have been asking for more funding for education, have been asking for more funding for infrastructure and health care, and having not seen those things, now the electorate has taken their revenge on elected officials, and that happened on the recent runoffs with so many incumbents losing to new challengers. I think a big lesson to learn is incumbents better pay attention to who the voters are, or we're going to have a lot more of them lose in November.
And we'll talk about specifically the House GOP leadership about what happened there in affirmation of what you guys were doing. We'll talk about Oklahoma. But on a 10,000-foot level, Mr. Leader, what did the primary and runoffs teach us?
Well, I think it's a little bit too far to say that they didn't see any new movement. There was $500 million additional in education, 20% additional funding. We are not where we need to be, but there was a great first step. And what we also saw is the three members in runoffs that voted for those things, they all won, and they all won handily. Those that had a vision for the state of Oklahoma, those that executed the vision for the state of Oklahoma, they were rewarded with the second term by their voters. And while I do agree 100% though with my colleague Representative Dunnington, the voters want a plan, they want action. They rewarded those that took very hard votes, that took very hard stances, and proved they were willing to work towards a plan.
Now, for the first time for both of you guys, I think this is correct. You'll be serving with a different chief executive. Is that correct?
Correct.
Come January, come February. It is now former Attorney General Edmondson and Mr. Kevin Stitt, who is the outsider. The stage is set. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the stage is very much set. You have Kevin Stitt, who is an outsider politician. You have Drew Edmondson, who if we had a Kennedy family in Oklahoma, it would be the Edmondsons. You have the consummate insider. You have Kevin Stitt that wants to come in with fresh ideas, that wants to change Oklahoma, wants to breathe a breath of fresh air, wants to make Oklahoma a top 10 state. And what I'm hoping happens over this next 2 months is he lays out that plan. He lays out where he has a vision for the state of Oklahoma, funding core services, and keeping regulations low, keeping taxes low, and moving this state forward. And I think that's what Kevin Stitt's going to do.
Okay, my favorite Harry Truman quote, of course, is the only history we don't know is what the history we haven't read yet, right? In 1994, the finalists for Attorney General were Mike Hunter and Drew Edmondson, okay? So not all the old outsiders are out, right? So you look at this, you see Drew Edmondson. Is this the best chance that the Democrats have had in a generation to take back the governor's office?
Well, first of all, I can say that I applaud the fact that Mr. Stitt wants to move Oklahoma in a better direction, wants to move Oklahoma into the top 10, as he would say, in so many categories. Unfortunately, he has supported so many of the same policies that have put us in the bottom 10 in the state of Oklahoma over the last decade. So you can't say that you want to do one thing, but yet support policies that have put us in the other place. As I've just talked about earlier for incumbents, Oklahoma is ready for a change. We want significant change. We want real vision for a future that's better than our past. And I think that Drew Edmondson is the best opportunity the state has had for real change, for a new direction, and look forward to continue to support his effort towards November.
We talk about local races, local politics here. We have a collegial atmosphere. It's why we're the most watched on Sunday morning. However, let's stop that, okay? Let's now talk about you guys. In the House of Representatives, 10 people were in runoffs this last week. In the GOP side, okay? 6 of the 7 so-called platform folks were defeated because of 10-10. Can you folks take advantage of the chaos on their side and make gains in the House of Representatives? Go at him.
Well, I hate to disappoint you this morning, Scott, but I actually think that what just took place in the runoffs is less about being a Republican and a Democrat and more about candidates that are talking about a future, talking about vision for the state of Oklahoma. I believe that Democrats have been talking about this vision for the last 8 years, and I'm very pleased to see the electorate is now finally starting to pay attention to things like more funding for education, making sure that all citizens have health care, making sure that we're investing in infrastructure. These are the vision. This is the type of thing that Democrats have been talking about for years now, and it's very pleasing to see that the electorate is finally woken up to the fact that there is a different way to do things here other than supermajority Republican.
I took a swing for chaos. It didn't work. Let me ask you to be brutally frank. These 6 of these 7 folks who defeated incumbents the other day are more in line with GOP leadership than the folks left, aren't they?
To a large extent, yes, absolutely. I mean, if you look at what happened last year, this GOP leadership was able to, in a very conservative manner, though, increase education funding, increase public health funding. We now have, on a 12-month trailing average, 11% growth in the state of Oklahoma. That is 11%, ladies and gentlemen. We have 10% growth compared to this time 12 years ago, just on a month-to-month average. We are going to be putting well over $350 million in the rainy day fund. The GOP leadership has done a great job in moving this state forward over the last 2 years. And what the citizens said was, there were some that were just not helpful. They weren't helpful. They didn't buy into that vision. This was an intramural fight where Republicans said, we want growth, we want a vision, and we want to move the state forward.
Here's a tease for next week. Who's more in line with the House GOP leadership, Mr. Stitt or Mr. Edmondson? Talk amongst yourselves. We'll talk about it next week. All right, we predicted this. Oklahoma Education Association, OKLED, education back on the front page. We're not talking about medical marijuana this week. How impactful are they going to be in November after what happened the other night?
Well, I think the education vote is going to be very impactful for what happens in November. And I think the education vote, I think it would be a mistake for the Democrats to believe that they have a stranglehold on the education vote. I'm knocking on doors in my district, talked to well over 600, me and my team have talked to well over 600 people this week on our district. And when I talk to education voters, they're not partisan. They're not Republican, Democrat. They're for education. They're for a vision. Now, they still want low taxes. They still want low regulations. They want efficient government, but they want to make sure the important things are funded. And yeah, they are a voice to be reckoned with, and I don't think they want to be taken for granted. I think they want a plan, and they want an execution on that plan.
Dr. Dunnington, your reply.
Well, I think education voters absolutely had an effect on the runoff. I think there's a reason why almost everyone that voted against revenue to fund education is not coming back to the state capitol next year in February. But when we talk about education voters and we talk about the November election, what we're looking at isn't to talk about the past, about how much new funding we put in for teacher raises. What we're talking about is the future. How much new money are we going to put into the classroom? How much new money are we going to put in to investing in technology? How much new money are we going to put in to make sure that we lessen class sizes for our teachers and for our students? Those are going to be the kinds of policy implications for education that are going to matter in November. And if they don't hear the candidates talking how they're going to fund it, I think you'll see a big movement with education voters again in November.
We shall see. Thank you very much for being here. See this again at news9.com/yourvotecounts. Follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter @MitchellTalks. Have a great Labor Day holiday.